Psalm 29. Well, there's an interesting, I don't know what to call it, theme. In well, the last verse we looked at last time was verse 7. The voice of the Lord strikes with bolts of lightning. Very symbolic. And I talked a lot about that. And then in verse 8 he says, the voice of the Lord makes the barren wilderness quake. The voice of the Lord. What? Is David saying in some kind of, pre-scientific way, that thunder that you heard, that is the Lord's voice. That the bolt of lightning, that's the Lord's voice. No, that's not what he's saying. He's using very symbolic, artistic, poetic language. And when he talks about the voice of the Lord, what's the purpose? First of all, what's the purpose of the voice? Well, what do you do with your voice? Mostly, you talk. You express yourself. I've told you this before. I've never literally, through my sense of hearing, heard the voice of God. I know of people, and I know people who have. So I don't have any kind of bias against the fact that happens. Okay, just hasn't happened to me. But I have heard from God. Okay, what's the point of God's voice? I mean, what could possibly be the object, the objective, the point of what David writes about here in such symbolic language? All right, don't have it all figured out, but consider this. God wants to communicate with us. He created us, and he's not done. He didn't. One of the simplistic ways to think about the theology of deism is that the universe, the natural order, is like a clock that God wound up, and then he threw it out into space, and we just make the best of it now. I don't believe that. I feel strongly that God is still involved with us, the creation. He's not done. And he speaks. His voice is to communicate to us. What's he communicate? Well, if you look at these two verses, and then actually verse 9, okay, I'm going to read 7, 8, 9 here. The voice of the Lord strikes with bolts of lightning. The voice of the Lord makes the barren wilderness quake. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists mighty oaks and strips the forest bare. So what? Okay. I'm not getting from that the message of the Lord, the message conveyed by his voice. But what I am getting is, you surely should pay attention to the voice of God. It's incredibly, in fact, I think David is running out of ways to describe the power and majesty of God's voice. Okay. The very last of verse 9, though, this may be, I think it gives a hint for, so what is the message of his voice? Well, in his temple, everyone shouts, glory. I don't think it's the only or the complete message, but the message of this incredibly powerful voice is, I am incredibly powerful. And to that message, what our response ought to be is glory. Verse 10, the Lord rules over the floodwaters. The Lord reigns as king forever. The Lord gives his people strength. The Lord blesses them with peace. Now, after the Lord rules over the floodwaters, one of the things I get from that, the natural disasters and the floodwaters would have been one of the primary natural disasters that the people in David's day would have had to be concerned about. These are not random, caused by chance events. There is a ruler over all of this, and the ruler is God. The Lord rules over the floodwaters. There are a lot of times in life when it feels like what's happening is random. I mean, almost like, well, if there's a God, he's not paying much attention here. Well, here's the truth. The Lord rules over that. Okay, now I'm gonna be, I want to be quick to say, well, that doesn't make my difficulty go away, right? Floodwaters are destructive. And just the fact that God, the Lord, rules over the floodwaters, that doesn't make the floodwaters go away. It doesn't make the floodwaters any less destructive. So it's not like, hey, don't get so upset about the floodwaters because it's all under God's control. No, I think floodwaters are destructive. But we gotta realize even this destructive force that seems to us random, unfair, unjustified, even those, the Lord rules over those. Then the Lord reigns as king forever. This is one of the most important ideas in all of the Bible, in my opinion. The Lord reigns as king forever. Now, in a democratic republic, which is what we have in the U.S., hey, let's face it, our country was birthed out of a revolution against a king. We don't want a king. And I think, okay, I don't really want a king, and much of the world has moved toward a more representative form of government. Good for the world. It's good for us. I like the fact that America is a democratic republic. But that was unknown, not virtually, literally unknown in David's day. There were kings, and by the way, there were hierarchies of kings. There were kings over people kings over those kings, kings over those kings, and so forth, up to, and the king over all would have exerted his dominance militarily. That's how he got to be the king overall. But David, well, he says it, the Lord reigns as king forever. Every other king had a temporary reign, right? All the kings of Israel, temporary. Some for a longer period of a temporary time, others for a shorter period. But all the human kings have a discrete, short amount of time for their reign. The Lord reigns as king forever. Why would, all right, we don't have any regard for the idea of a king. We don't need to, right? But yeah, we do. We need to understand and somehow embrace the idea that the Lord is the king. I don't care which political party is in power. I don't care what group is pulling the strings. The Lord reigns as king forever. They are not the end all. They are not the supreme authority. And they are not forever. God is. I feel like if we lose track of that, we're toast. I have to have the hope that my world, the world I live in, the life I'm living, is somehow ruled by the king. I have, somehow there's got to be a power and authority above my own. Now, there are people who they don't like that at all. And I'll have to admit there are times when I don't like it either. Part of the reason is I want to be my own boss. I want what I want. I don't want anybody telling me I can't have what I want. I want to be. Okay, but here's the bottom line. You are not the king. You're not the queen. God is. If we don't get that right, none of the rest of life is going to work. It comes down to who owns me? Who rules me? Is there a ruler other than me? Humanism says no, there's not. Humanism excludes, but strict humanism excludes God. The reality, though, is God is the king. The Lord reigns as king forever. You might not like it. You might resist it. You may wish it was otherwise. You may even teach otherwise. But you're not going to change reality. Reality is the Lord is the king. The challenge today is to live our lives as though that were the truth. Because it is the truth. To live my life, for you to live your life in light of the fact that the Lord is the king forever. It changed a lot of things in all our lives. Okay, that's it. See you next time on So Care with Stevie.